Our moderator, my distinguished panel members and members of the audience, very good morning and thank you for the opportunity. For the next 15 minutes or so, and I don't hope to take longer than that, I'm going to briefly deal with the concept of exhaustion of rights, the concept of parallel imports, what the provisions under the Patents Act and the trademarks say in India. And I think because some of the prior speakers have already covered some of the areas which I'm going to speak, I think I'm going to focus more on the kind of business strategies which could be implemented to tackle or counter parallel importation. So as Professor Godard has already alluded to at great length, every intellectual property right owner, obviously there is an incentive to create, there is incentive to protect intellectual property, and that's a bargain for which the intellectual property right owner gets certain exclusive rights. Now, the doctrine of first sale and the exhaustion is actually some kind of a limitation on that exclusive right, because the underlying philosophy is that once the IP rights owner has obtained a fair share of an economic return or a reasonable economic return on his IP right by either first sale of that patented product or a trademark product, or by authorizedly placing the goods or service in the market, he should then not be allowed to interfere with further redistribution and resale of that product. There are broadly three different types of exhaustion. My prior speakers have already alluded to in greater detail. There is national exhaustion. Russia, Turkey, Ukraine, Brazil, these are some of the countries which follow national exhaustion of rights. There is regional exhaustion. The European Economic Area region is a classic example of regional exhaustion. And then there is international exhaustion. Again, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, probably certain facets of the law in India also, they follow international exhaustion of rights. Now, what is parallel import? Parallel import is really import into a country via channels which are other than those which are contractually negotiated by the person with whom the IPR vests. It's actually a parallel trade, a rival business from the business which is conducted by a brand owner or an IP rights owner, and it's almost like a parallel business which is being run by the parallel importer, and therefore hence probably the name parallel importation. But I think the important thing to remember here is parallel importation does not mean that the goods which are entering into the market are counterfeit. They are original goods, but they are entering into the market or being imported into the market without express authorization of the IP rights owner. Certain ill effects of parallel imports or adverse impacts of parallel imports, we all know that one of the primary purpose of a trademark is to indicate source and origin. But apart from that, I think another important function of a trademark is actually for a consumer to suggest a minimum threshold of quality which he should expect when he buys that good. And I think one of the preeminent effects or adverse impact of parallel import is it could lead to derogation or dilution of brand equity. To give you an example, especially in the context of hardware or especially in the context of other electronic equipment, the intellectual property right owner is extremely reluctant and would never extend its warranties, etc., on goods which have been parallelly imported into India, for example. And that would definitely result in disappointment to the end consumer, and that will have an impact on the brand equity or the brand image of that product. Obviously, another major impact of parallel importation would be it will have a disastrous impact on the economics of the IP rights owner, because essentially parallel importation thrives where there is a substantial price differential between the country of export and the country of import, and therefore it tends to cut through the profit margins of the IP rights owner. I think the other main impact of parallel importation is what we call as loss of quality control, because the goods which are entering into the market by way of parallel importation the brand owner or the IP rights owner has absolutely no control over the quality of those goods, the way they are stored, whether the condition of those goods have been changed, impaired, etc. And therefore, it's complete loss of control over the quality of those goods. Also, there is another example here where, especially in pharmaceutical patents context, if assuming for a minute that if a country like India, where there is a compulsory licensing mechanism and a pharmaceutical product has been brought under compulsory license, and therefore the price of that pharmaceutical product is cheaper in India as compared to, say, European market or overseas, a parallel importation could basically, what it would do is it would lead to depleting the supply of that product in India, which could be an essential medicine, because more and more products would be exported from India, as India would be an attractive territory, or India would become an attractive territory for export of that low price product into